I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is Monday, April 21st, 2014. We're here for the purposes of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. We're running a little late because of executive session. It is 7:44, and I'm going to ask all of you to welcome the Boy Scout Den 2, Pack 24 from Hawthorne and Emerson Elementary Schools. I'm going to invite the scouts right up here, like we practiced earlier, to help lead the entire room in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see. Owen, Spencer, Max, and Gavin, is that correct? All right, and Gavin won our mock election earlier, so he is technically our mayor for the next 30 seconds. Gavin, lead us in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Deuter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Polumsky.
Here.
Bram.
Here.
Pipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
Conquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
14 present, 0 absent.
14 present, 0 absent. We have a quorum. On to agenda item number 3, receipt of written communications from the public. Is there anybody at this time who has any written communication they would like to submit to Clerk Spencer? If so, please approach the dais and hand it to Clerk Spencer. Mr. Crummer, you have something you'd want to? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time who wants to submit any written communications? Seeing none, we'll go on to agenda item number 4, public forum. This is a portion of our meeting where the public has an opportunity to address the council, specifically the chairman, on any item they wish. We ask, out of the courtesy to us and others who may want to speak, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. If you go over 3 minutes, I will give you a prompt and ask you to wrap up. You have 3 minutes yourself. It's not transferable, so if you brought 3 people, you don't necessarily get 9 minutes with one person. We ask that you stick to the 3 minutes. That having been said, Clerk Spencer, do we have anybody this evening who wishes to speak during public forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do, and I'll start with Terrence Lean, 707 South Hillside.
Good evening, and if I could just take a quick preface before the clock starts running. Back in the days of Bob Palmer, if you had 3 questions and you didn't tell him you had 3, he'd answer the first question and hang up the phone. So in my case, I've got five items. Hopefully will be very brief on each one, and please let me know if I'm not being brief.
Could you state your name and address for us, please?
Yes, 707 South Hillside Avenue, Elmhurst, Illinois. First is proliferation of stop signs. It seems to me that they keep growing in Elmhurst, and if I can quote my history in St. Louis back in the 50s, and yes, I am that old, that city had stop signs on practically every corner you could imagine, including main highways and main boulevards, and as a result, nobody ever stopped at the stop signs. And it seems at times that that's occurring in Elmhurst, where stop might mean hesitate or not even that. And with apologies to the police department, we couldn't put enough officers on the floor, on the street, to monitor all of those. So I just leave that as a thought. Homeowners insurance. Just recently received a renewal with a 15% increase. When I questioned the reason for that, it was stated that Elmhurst has had bad experiences with wind and flooding, and if I can do a uneducated extrapolation and everybody else gets the same kind of increase, I just came up with $600,000. So there certainly are additional costs and I wouldn't try to minimize the losses that actual happen to people, but we're all paying for that. And so if we can find a way to finally solve those problems, we'll all be ahead. Happened to catch a little bit of the council meeting on Channel 6 last Wednesday, where there was a motion carried to deliver some money to the developer at St. Charles in 83. In support of that, indicated that he's done a very good job, and I don't have any argument one way or on that. It would be helpful to see some quantification of what represents a really good job. On the other hand, if we run into a bad developer, can we ask him for money back? Understand that we are at some point going to lose one of our major occupants in the industrial park. Apparently going to build a new office complex in Oak Brook, and apparently several hundred white-collar jobs will move with that. I sometimes think the industrial park is there but not recognized as really a very substantial contributor to our tax base. And I guess my last one is general obligation bonds and perhaps how it might relate to the Addison Street parking. Understand there is no fixed number. I'll pick a number between 15 and 20 million. Is there some study made that would extrapolate that into how much will be increase in our property taxes to pay for those bonds? And I guess my thinking is, well, at times I hear we don't want to be like Naperville or Arlington Heights. I'm not concerned that we don't end up looking like Bridgeview, Lyons, or Lombard, who all have suffered extreme increases in property taxes based on bonds issued under home rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
My name is Claude Pogach, 566 West Gladys. I'd like to thank the two aldermen that proposed a referendum on that Addison parking garage. And I understand from the paper that the Finance Committee figures that it's a issue that, well, they really don't want to put it out as a referendum. It's an advisory referendum. Well, I don't quite understand that, see? Because there's only so many ways it can be paid for. Our partners pay for it, the city pays for it, general obligation bonds, or some grants. I can't see why they don't want to put it out there for the public. Is that an indication they don't trust the public? Or that the public doesn't want the parking garage? Is that the grand fear? Why make it advisory? Doesn't make sense. Really doesn't. And then the committee, they were talking about, well, this referendum should have been put in a long time ago. Well, should it? Residents asked for information about it. Finally had to go to the Attorney General. Couldn't get it out of the city. See? So I don't quite understand. You don't want to tell the public about it. You don't want to tell them how you're going to finance it, but you think it's a grand idea. Wonder why. Wonder why. On another note, last meeting, we found out that the city and the business community are partners. I got $22,000 from you guys. Nice partners, huh? They're on the collecting end all the time. And then, the mayor has made statements that there's money in TIF 1 that's going to go to taxing partners. You guys haven't voted on it, but he's already decided you're gonna do it. What I don't understand is, we know what the business community is, and we know you want to help the taxing community, but just what do you gentlemen and mayor think about the resident? Where does he sit in this? Does he have any place? Or doesn't he exist at all other than to tax?
Mr. Pagash, could you wrap it up, please?
Surely, Mayor. I'd really like a comment to the press from you, because you're talking for the council on exactly what you think, what place the resident of this community serves.
Pamela Uslander, 102 Crest Avenue, Bensonville.
My name is Pamela Uslander. I live at 102 East Crest in Bensonville. I'm here today once again in front of you. The City Council will vote tonight on whether my original location on the west side of York at Schiller will be deemed an unsafe area to operate my business. There is no defensible reason that would disallow me to be on the west side of York Road at Schiller. The only reason is someone has declared my business unsafe due to a possible, which is still in debate, parking garage on Addison Street, 1 block away from my location, or a possible demolition or reconstruction of other property. But I'm a little confused. When the location of the building on Addison Street was demolished about a year or so ago, I was not a safety hazard then, and I was not asked to move. When there was construction and refacement of Citibank and the Schiller passageway about 3 or 4 years ago, which is only a few feet away from where I stand, I was not a safety hazard, and I was not asked to move. But now, I'm a safety hazard, and I'm being deemed unsafe based on assumptions and possibilities that are not warranted. In 23 years, no one has ever indicated I or my location are unsafe. Even with demolition and refacement of property that is only a few feet away from where I stand. Not one single incident. I was never cited or approached concerning any safety issues. I'm a fixture in the city, and I believe the people enjoy having me in the downtown area, and I think I've proven that with over 1,060 signatures to date on my petition at change.org. To relocate me on possibilities and assumptions, or to allow an illegal A-frame sandwich board sign to replace me from my original location is unjustified. I should be allowed to remain in my original location, and I hope tonight's vote will be done with great thought. Thank you.
John Landry,
Good evening. I'm here
One
simply
second.
in.
One second, sir.
I can't read your.
Well, that's right, we have a double check.
But I can tell you it's Hinsdale, Illinois.
If you could clearly articulate your name and your address,
I
because we
will.
can't read it up here. We'd
My name is
appreciate
John Landry. My address, my office address is 120 East Ogden Avenue, Hinsdale 60521. We are here simply in support and representing Ms. Uslander. I have no independent comments other than in support of her statement that she just made. Thank you.
Okay, next, Clerk Spencer.
Okay. Andrea Alvarez, 182 North York.
Andrea Alvarez, community lawyer, Citizen Advocacy Center, 182 North York. Mayor Morley, let me start by stating that the Citizen Advocacy Center has monitored and been opposed to the Addison Street project since the inception over 5 years ago. not because we dispute the need for more parking, but because the public process around this project has been anti-democratic from the start, resulting in 2 proposals, 2 hearings, and 2 discussions that were flawed. Tonight, I will give you a brief overview of the sham process and encourage you to start over and correct it. Or at the very least, I encourage you to use the undemocratic nature of this process as a learning experience and implement reforms. So when future projects and proposals come before the City Council, the commissions and committees, residents can trust the government decision-making process. In February 2009, City Council approved the redevelopment agreement. In December 2010, the 6-story design was first mentioned publicly as an alternative to the 4-story design. In March and September 2012, the project was discussed in closed executive session. The 2 September meetings were found to be in violation of the Illinois Open Meetings Act, and the Attorney General instructed the city to release the tapes. In December 2012, the developer submitted an application to the zoning department. In late February, the public hearing began. After the hearing was completed, the Zoning Commission issued a report in June 2013 where they unanimously recommended that the City Council deny the request as presented. Mayor Morley, at this point, I started personally observing Elmhurst meetings. On December 31st, 2013, the Illinois Attorney General again found that Elmhurst violated state law. This time it was the FOIA statute. The city improperly denied a request for documents by stating that the materials were pre-decisional. The Attorney General found that the documents contained factual material, and the city was instructed to release them. On January 2014, the city, heeding public criticism that it should have been the applicant from the start, now as the applicant, presented a reworked application to the Zoning and Planning Commission. The city presented lengthy and uninterrupted testimony. At the continued January 30th meeting, several citizens and business interests testified. Citizen testimony was challenged. General disarray occurred, and comments and behavior of some commissioners was intimidating. This may have suppressed other citizens' desire to participate. Testimony was completed 2 weeks later on February 13. At the commission deliberation on February 27th, the city presented new information that was not publicly available to citizens prior to the meeting. No citizens were allowed to review and respond to this information. The deliberation included a discussion of business interests, financial concerns, the future intention of the City Council, and other pending projects. The major difference between the report issued in 2013 and the current one is the conclusion. Mayor Morley, I urge you to lead and show that you care about the democratic process by listening to citizens' voices and implementing policies to uphold the democratic process in the future.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline.
Tamara Brenner, 137 North Caroline. Well, we've reached the final stages of the process by which the city has set out to give itself permission to violate its own zoning code and downtown plan in order to build an oversized parking garage on Addison Street. Whether 55 feet or 65 feet, the structure will be out of proportion to the surrounding neighborhood, and its construction will set a precedent for future development. Although we have other tall buildings in town, so far we don't have tall parking garages in the street wall. The process to gain approval for conditional use and variance from the zoning code has been a sham. A petition with 460 signatures supporting a 4-story parking garage and opposing a 6-story structure was one of many facts purposefully not considered by the Zoning Commission. The so-called deliberation was a travesty, as is the resulting commission report. Meanwhile, we seem to have a small number of business interests essentially dictating city policy, and not just on the parking garage. For instance, also on tonight's agenda, we have up for consideration the removal of the pushcart vendor license from the east end of the Schiller Parkway, something desired by various city center business interests for years, as documented in newspaper articles from 2003 and in a letter from City Center in 2011. Do you really expect people to believe the claim that the only consideration here is concern for the public's safety due to congestion and potential construction? City Council is also asked to approve tonight a variety of City Center-sponsored special events to occur throughout the coming year. These events will also result in pedestrian congestion in proximity to possible construction areas. Where's the concern for the public's safety in those reports? A small number of connected business insiders have regular and repeated formal interaction with city officials, and their views are given deference. But your position, Mayor, as well as that of the Finance Committee Chair and possibly that of the collective City Council, is that it is sufficient for the average resident to cast a ballot once every couple of years in terms of their input into city policy. The Addison Garage project is being paid for with public monies, meaning everybody in town will be subsidizing the costs. And the only role the public is allowed to play is piggy bank. Public hearings are required by law, but as we have seen, issues brought forth by the public are routinely ignored in the actual decision-making process. A referendum would be required under state law before such public monies could be spent in a non-home rule municipality, but because Elmhurst is home rule, there has been and will be no such referendum here. Instead, this council will be moving forward despite negative public sentiment with a substantial change from what is contained within the plain language of our downtown plan. There's talk about a so-called vision, one which has been discussed in closed-door executive session meetings and in confidential memos between developers and the city dating back to at least 2008. Nothing is visionary about a parking garage of whatever size, and it remains a mystery just what will be built that will require so much new, publicly funded parking all in one place. Meanwhile, the community vision contained in the downtown plan is for 2 to 4 story buildings to predominate and for parking garages to respect the scale of the downtown.
Mike Baker, 432 East Park.
Mike Baker, 432 East Park Avenue. Residents meeting after meeting come to the council to speak and say their piece for 3 minutes. Some don't come anymore because they don't feel they're listened to. Tonight you have the opportunity to show you listen and care about their opinion. An all too commonplace 12-2 vote by this council on the Edison parking deck would show the residents their voice just doesn't matter. The Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee issued 2 reports you'll consider tonight on the Edison deck. I would like you to support the minority report, which essentially promotes a 5-story structure, not a 6-story garage. The public throughout the hearing process has spoken overwhelmingly in favor of a 4-story structure. Support of the 5-story proposal is not exactly what the public wants. It's not exactly what the council desires, but it shows each side is compromising and listening to the other. If you choose to listen to the public, you would hear concerns over changing the character of downtown, concerns over the need of adding 600+ parking spots for parking, a developer that we're partnered with that has no internet presence, concerns over traffic patterns, and costs which are in the millions and millions of dollars. This isn't a one-time opportunity. At 5 stories, more floors can be added later if needed. Economically, wouldn't it be great in the future if we needed to expand the garage because of the robust and economic activity in downtown? I encourage you, give the public a strong indication tonight that you value their feedback. Please listen, because if you don't, these same residents you're thinking will use the garage in the future may turn and take their business elsewhere. On another item on the agenda tonight, agenda item 619, the Rock the Block Party proposed by the City Center. This really sounds like it could be a great annual event, which according to information could bring 4,000 people to our downtown area. According to the piece, there will be a live band playing on a stage facing York and Schiller Street. There will be food tents and liquor served to the patrons. And then in looking at the proposal, it struck me. The street vendors, primarily the hot dog lady, are being moved to a new location for safety purposes. Yet we're setting tents up on York Road. We're setting tables up in front of stores. Families with children are going to be invited downtown to walk the street. It seems the same safety concerns should apply to this event as applies to our street vendors. We're moving one vendor from her location because safety is such a critical issue. Under the same guidelines, how in the world can we feel it's safe to have thousands of people merchants and musicians outside downtown when this destructive construction is taking place. By the same token, if it's safe to bring these thousands of people downtown, I guess it's safe to have one more vendor at her legendary location. It makes me wonder if it's not so much what the permit is applied for in Elmhurst, but who is actually requesting it.
Michael Cremery, 570 West Crockett Avenue.
Michael Cremery, 570 West Crockett. Items I'd like to review in regard to the Addison parking deck. Cost, parking data, public input. Cost, $21 million, 14 aldermen, $1.5 million per alderman. Again, I respectfully ask each of you, are you planning to spend $1.5 million each on a parking garage based on a parking study that has questionable data? Why does the entire cost need to be paid by Elmhurst residents? If there's a valid economic ROI, then where is the private investment for the parking garage? Number two, parking data. The consultant hired and paid by the applicant used the supply and demand data provided by the applicant. Does not anyone find this approach to be inconsistent with business standards? This cannot be a compromise for 5 floors when the data for a 6-story parking garage is suspect. Now, I want to clarify that I support the economic growth opportunities for the town of Elmhurst. And many of the Elmhurst residents stating opposition to a 6-story structure have indicated support for a 4-story structure containing 460 spaces. Public input. In regard to the Addison Avenue parking garage, it has been documented on multiple occasions over the past 4 years that when public input was provided, our voices were simply discarded or ignored. A good example would be, as people are talking, people on the city council are flipping through papers, reading something else. Unfortunately, the actions of some on this city council tonight may again prove this to be true, that our voices are not heard. But I honestly hope that I'm wrong. In closing, I simply state that when each of you vote to spend $1.5 million, you're also promising to use the parking garage each and every time that you're in downtown Elmhurst, regardless of the distance that you will need to walk to get to the desired business establishment. Again, I honestly hope that I'm wrong, but if a 6-story structure is to be built and it is not utilized to a high occupancy rate, I would encourage Elmhurst residents to respectfully, emphasis on respectfully, remind their city council, aldermen, and mayor to use the 6-story parking garage paid for by the already overburdened homeowners and taxpayers of Elmhurst. Thank you.
Diana Cremery, 570 West Crockett Avenue.
Diana Cremery, 570 West Crockett Avenue, Elmhurst, Illinois. The Zoning and Planning Commission report dated March 20th, 2014 specifically states on page 13, quote, approval of case number 14P-01/135-149, Addison Avenue conditional use and associated variations as presented and with the following conditions: that the proposed 7 parking spaces on the east side of Addison Avenue in front of the subject parking structure be dedicated for the loading purposes between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. That commuter parking be prohibited in this proposed mixed-use retail parking structure. Closed quote. 1. Members of the Zoning and Planning Commission voted based upon these conditions, and now the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee has simply discarded these conditional requirements. The approval provided with these conditions to be maintained. These conditions have been removed by the DPZ committee. The applicant must resubmit the request. This would be no different than a resident of Elmhurst obtaining variance approval from the Zoning and Planning Commission for their house and then having their architect create entirely new blueprints for the remodeling design. 2, during the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee meeting on March 24, 2014, the aldermen and city staff discussed the removal of these conditions. Yet, Nathaniel Werner, City of Elmhurst Planning and Zoning Administrator, and Darrell Whistler, Zoning and Planning Commission Chairman, remained silent. I would be interested to hear why the 2 listed conditions can simply be discarded by the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee without having the applicant reapply for the variance request. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Last, we have Deanne Muzaki, 156 South Sunnyside.
Hi, good evening. Deanne Mizaki from 156 South Sunnyside. I believe we submitted some written comments to the council earlier today. I certainly have extra copies if you need them. I'm commenting on the current proposed stormwater policy. Stormwater is essential. It's unquestionably a very emotional issue in Elmhurst, but the desire by the committees in this council to do something is not a justification for doing something that's wrong, doing something that won't work, and doing something that disproportionately is going to burden private property owners and residents in Elmhurst for a benefit that the city staff has never quantified as a benefit that's actually going to make any difference when it comes to stormwater management. The current policy that's been proposed is going to condition stormwater management in connection with a building permit for a new single-family home. It's not tied to actual mitigation needs for stormwater increase usage for property. It's got minimums that, as we set forth in our submission, are not going to actually physically be able to work on a typical Elmhurst lot. It requires minimums that were pulled out of thin air by Alderman Healy at the Public Works Committee meeting that are not tied, again, in any way to some type of actual stormwater mitigation purpose. It should be applying to, if the city is going to adopt such a policy, it should be applying to everyone who's going to be adding net new impervious surfaces to their lot, if it's going to be a big concrete patio, if it's going to be a new addition on a house, if it's going to be an expanded garage. There's no justification, if you're going to focus on net new impervious stormwater concerns, for focusing on single-family homes being built new as opposed to other sources of net new impervious. Furthermore, the policy and the stormwater systems that the city has recommended are the type that DuPage County says are only going to work in maybe 18% of Elmhurst soils. So you are talking about, and we documented that and cited that in the document we submitted today as well. So this is basically a policy where I understand the council, because stormwater's been talked about and because people want to know that the council is doing something, that this is a very easy play to basically try to impose burdens on what are perceived as politically unpopular people in the city, people who want to build new single-family homes in Elmhurst. But with all due respect, this policy is ill thought out. It's based on equations that are of scientific questionability. And I think that the city needs, particularly the city council, should take this item off the consent agenda and actually send it, have a real-world discussion about the pros and cons of this. And quite frankly, you should instruct the city staff to instruct you and to educate you about the pros and cons of this position. We further submitted to the City Council in October of 2013 a very lengthy document offering our proposed solutions to some of the stormwater conditions that are facing Elmhurst, and those have never been acted on at all by the City Council or by the city staff. And I fundamentally question how this council can make an informed decision about a stormwater policy when the city staff itself has admitted that they actually lack the data that would allow them to tell whether these types of policies would actually have any real-world mitigation effects or any real-world stormwater policy results, particularly on the people of Elmhurst who are having their basements flooded. Once again, we've submitted some proposed alternatives that would actually be not only capable of being publicly funded for modest amounts, but would actually be able to be funded for far less and would have a greater impact on actual homes that are being affected as compared to placing this burden on private sector parties when you actually have no idea if this is even going to have an effect at all. And in fact, you may have a detrimental effect on the homes where these units are being placed. Thank you.
That is all as far as who signed in tonight, Mr.
That's it for a public forum with regard to people who have had an opportunity to sign in. Is there anybody in the audience at this time? Please raise your hand and let's see how many we have. Anybody at this time who did not have an opportunity to sign in who wishes to address the council? Okay, seeing one, please approach.
Good evening. My name is Susan Smentek, 196 North Larch Avenue. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you this evening. Briefly, regarding the Addison Street parking deck, I'm here on behalf of my family and my Larch Avenue neighbors to encourage you to please approve the lesser number of floors for the deck. As you can see from the proliferation of the blue ribbons on the trees in our neighborhood that support the lower number of floors, given the choice between 5 and 6 stories, it is our hope that you will agree that 5 stories will provide an overabundance of parking in the area. And thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
Okay, anyone else at this time who did not have an opportunity to sign in and wishes to address the council? Last call, seeing none. That concludes our public forum portion of the meeting. On to announcements. Any announcements this evening? Clerk Spencer?
Prescription drug take-back day. Anyone that has prescriptions they need to dispose of, you can do that on Saturday, April 26th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Elmhurst Police Department West Parking Lot, 125 East 1st Street. And if you need more information, elmhurst.org.
Okay, any other announcements this evening from the dais? Alderman Bram, done, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick note, another recognition for the city of Elmhurst. We were recognized recently in a study by Movoto Real Estate as being one of the top 10 places to live in Illinois. Elmhurst actually came in at number 5, so in spite of sometimes our challenges that we have, and we're going to discuss a few tonight, it is truly a great place to live. Thanks.
Terrific. Anybody else? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Honquist and I would like to announce that we're going to hold a 6th Ward Town meeting on Thursday, May 15th, 7:30 p.m. at Community Bank of Elmhurst. Thank you.
Very good. Any other announcements this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on. Consent agenda, agenda item number 6. At this time, is there any item on the consent agenda that anybody on the dais would wish to have removed for further discussion or comment? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to pull 6.15 back to committee and 6.21 from the consent agenda.
Well, we can discuss 6.15 under separately from the consent agenda. Technically, the courtesy, we allow chairman to pull back stuff to committee. So
technically, any committee member could pull a report back to committee. I conferred with City Attorney Storino about this prior to the meeting.
One second, Alderman Graham. No, it's not. It'd be a motion to refer, so it'd be the current report back, right? That's okay. We'll pull it, and Alderman Bram, we're going to pull it from the consent agenda. We'll have the conversation in a minute. We're not entertaining a motion for you to take it back to committee right now because we're just we're pulling it off the consent agenda.
But in all due respect, Mr. Mayor, it's not a motion. My understanding in the past history of this council is that any committee member could pull it back to committee.
In the past, we've allowed it as a courtesy, but technically a motion to refer to committee is what we're talking to.
Not to refer to committee.
Right. Actually, we're not talking about it right now. We're just pulling off consent agenda for now. So, Alderman Bram, you wish to have 6.15 and 6.21 removed from the consent agenda. Is that correct?
Sure.
Anyone else? Anyone else have anything they wish to remove from the consent agenda for further comment? Seeing none, I'll ask for approval of the consent agenda minus items 6.15 and 6.21. I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Alderman Hipskin, second by Alderman Levin. Clerk Spencer.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Onquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Palumski.
She said aye.
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. Bram.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. Consent agenda passes minus items 6.15 and 6.21. Before I entertain a motion to put 6.15 before the council, I understand that Alderman Brand would like to pull it back to committee. And I would ask if there is, before I ask for a motion to consider, I would ask for a consensus from the chairman. Otherwise, I'll do a formal request to pull it back to committee. Mr. Kennedy, do you want to pull this back to committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, I would prefer not to pull it back to committee. I believe we've done a thorough vetting of this issue, and we have report and information to move forward with a discussion and ultimate vote with the council tonight.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I would like to have a full understanding of why are we changing procedure all of a sudden due to this request. It has, as you just publicly stated, has always been our current practice for any committee member, as well as I conferred with City Attorney Storino and other of my fellow aldermen, that we have done this. Any residing alderman on the committee can pull something back to committee. So I would like justification on why we are changing this procedure tonight.
Alderman Bram, I did talk to City Attorney Storino about this. I can tell you it's a unique situation I've never encountered in the 7 years I've been up here, where a member of the committee and the chairman of that committee disagree about pulling it back to committee. So I'm going to default with the guidance of City Attorney Storino to go with a formal motion. So, Alderman Bram, as accorded by our rules 2.06W, motion to refer to committee, City Attorney Storino tells me it would be appropriate if you wanted to make a motion to refer this report back to committee.
It's not a referral, Mr. Mayor. A referral to committee is different than what this is. This is bringing something back to committee.
I'm aware, Alderman Bram, I answered your question in that
Not,
I
sir.
have a conflict within your own committee about bringing it back to committee. So I'm asking if you want to bring it back to the committee, the procedure I'm asking you to follow is to make a formal motion to refer the current report back to committee. So if you'd like to make that, if you'd like to move that motion, I will entertain that.
I appreciate that, and I will just say as part of my point of order that I did not receive to be put on the record justification on why we're changing procedure tonight. Therefore, I will make a motion, because my hand is forced, to make a motion to pull back 6.15 back to the Public Works and Buildings Committee for further discussion.
Okay, we have a motion to refer, hold on a second, Alderman, I'm sorry, Clerk Spencer, did you get that?
Pull back to committee for further discussion.
Did you cite the report number?
6.15.
Okay, so we have a motion to pull, a motion to refer back to committee, report 6.15. Do we have a second for that motion? Alderman Gutenkopf with a second. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Gutenkopf.
I seconded this because I don't think this should die for lack of a second, because I'm also about as flabbergasted as Alderman Bram. We're not referring a new issue to committee. We're pulling an issue that an alderman would like to have further discussion about. This isn't up for vote for the entire city council. This report, obviously an alderman feels hasn't been completely vetted. So I support his right to continue that discussion. He didn't sign the report. Clearly, there's an issue that is unresolved, and I don't think that this is an issue the entire city council should be weighing in on. I seconded it just because we need to further this discussion, and I'm still just flabbergasted that we're not pulling it back to committee to further vet it.
1 second, Alderman Brand. Alderman Brand, you have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, in all due respect to this motion, and I appreciate the second for this motion, I don't understand on how any alderman should be allowed to actually provide any feedback, especially if this is going back to committee. I have no other additional comments. I believe that there's a need for further discussion in committee, and I will leave it at that for this evening.
Okay, any other comments as it relates to the motion to pull 6.15 back to committee? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just restate that I felt in our committee meeting last Monday, we had a substantive discussion. I felt that at the end of that discussion, although Alderman Gutenkopf was not there, that the three members that were there came to a conclusion. After that, certainly there were some modifications made that were directed to the Assistant Public Works Director. She made those, sent the report out for review. I followed back up with her to understand if there were any additional questions from any alderman. Yes, there were. I felt that those had been answered sufficiently, and so I still, to this point, don't understand why this would need to be pulled back, because I feel that all questions and all matters have been clarified and understood. Thank you.
Alderman Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll limit it to the discussion and where we left off. The proposed report, I did have additional questions. Those questions were answered to my satisfactory. I had other thoughts and ideas in order to what I believe could be a potential to improve the recommendation. I voiced those concerns to city staff. As we all know, I cannot speak to my fellow committee members or have those messages relayed back to my fellow committee members, because that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I would think that, in all respect to any colleague, that if a fellow committee member would request further discussion, that respect would be given and there would be no further debate.
Okay, any other comments as it relates to pulling this, the motion to pull this back to committee, or refer this back to committee? Seeing none, I'd ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll on the motion before us.
Graham.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
No.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
No.
Palumski.
No.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
No.
Onquist.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
No.
I have 7 ayes and 7 nays.
What do we do now? 7 ayes, 7 nays. That's a tie. I vote to split, and I vote to support the motion, send it back to committee. Agenda item 6.21, iMotorsports. Clerk Spencer, I would ask that you please read the recommendation.
We'll talk about it later.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council direct the City Attorney to prepare a sales tax incentive agreement between the City of Elmhurst and iMotorsports, Inc., as outlined in this report. Signed by Kevin L. York, Chairman, Bob Dunn, Vice Chairman, Stephen W. Hipskin, and Marty Deuter.
Motion to approve this report and recommendation to put it before the council, Alderman York, a second by Alderman Dunn. Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a committee report signed by all 4 committee members. This is the first instance we've had to evaluate a request under the new sales tax incentive policy. And I think the report speaks for itself, and I'm willing to let other members of the committee make any comments or answer any questions that anybody on the council has.
Any other comments or questions with regard to report 6.21? Alderman Braham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to understand from the committee's perspective, if I could, Mr. Mayor, on the rationale of 2 parts of the recommendation before us tonight. The first part is the maximum total payout of $250,000, the reason for that. And then the second part being the sales tax receipts being split 50-50 from day one over the 10-year period that's also being recommended by this report.
Okay. Alderman York, you care to opine on the 250 payout and the 50-50 split of sales tax?
Thank you, Your Honor. The 250 was arrived at, the applicant indicated that there was a lot of work that was completed on the property. Just for the record, this is the old Suzuki dealer that's been being used for a number of years as a truck repair business, and not really generating any real economic incentives for the city. But they took the property, well, they bought the property, but along with buying the property in a distressed state came a lot of unexpected expenditures, as well as just refurbishment to get the property into the proper condition for a retail business that caters to upscale motorcycle clients. So that was the basis for the $250,000. And the reason for the 50-50 increment is the committee discussed it and felt like that it was a fair arrangement. These are all new dollars for the city of Elmhurst. This business did not exist here before. It's moving from Roselle. One of the key attractions to the Elmhurst area was the visibility that's afforded in the drive-by traffic on Grand Avenue by potential clients who are driving by to look at automobiles and those types of things. Their business in the past had been highly internet-based, but they understood the potential for drive-in business. So that was the basis for the 50-50, and it's actually very common in the incentives that councils have approved in the past.
Okay, any other comments? Alderman Hipskin.
I have a comment which I'll direct to the city council. I had the opportunity to go by the new facility over there, and they've done a lot of work over there. If you're a motorcycle person, you're gonna love this place. Even if you're not, they've taken a property that was just an eyesore and turned it into a very nice property, which is gonna pull from all over Chicagoland. I've talked to a number of people in the business, and this is a relatively unique store, not having any name brands right now, although it wouldn't surprise me if they had that in the future. Lots of room to expand. There aren't too many other stores like this around, so this is a real nice addition to Elmhurst and to our tax base.
Okay, any additional comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What sorts of clawback provisions do you envision incorporating into the agreement that you make with iMotorsports?
So the question is, and I know I was in part of that in committee, the way the contract's going to set up. Alderman Hipsky, you want to answer,
Well, I don't know the specific answers, but I know our staff well. It certainly is going to be a 10-year
a 10-year clawback, staying in the, in the location, and it's probably going to be very similar to all the other clawbacks that we've had in our other sales tax.
Including, which was discussed in committee, I was there, full refund should the establishment leave before achieving their incentive. So that's what was discussed in committee, was, if they get $100,000 of their $250 and they decided they would like to move out of Elmhurst, much like we've had in previous agreements, they would have to refund that money before, they would be on the hook for that money. So that's what was discussed in committee. Alderman Dunn?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I had some minor concerns about the amount, as Alderman Bram had mentioned. $250,000 is a lot of money. Just a couple items a couple pieces of data that we looked at in trying to determine what to do with the applicant. The EAV on this particular property has gone down every year over the past 5 years, and we expect that to be dramatically changed with the improvement to the property. I also was concerned that we do have several other sales tax incentive programs in place with some other very viable, successful businesses in town, that the incentive has helped them to get to that state. But looking at the information provided by city staff, our sales tax incentive is about 1% of our overall sales tax revenue. So it is certainly noticeable, but it's not a large hindrance. We believe this amount to be reasonable given those particular situations. Thanks.
Alderman Gutenkopf, I double-checked with City Attorney Storino, and it would be similar to our last ones, including the last two Lucky Motors and Napleton Acura, where there is a clawback, where it would be available for a yearly split of the sales tax or refund, but there is a clawback if they leave or go out of business. They're on the hook for that. They have to give the money back. So that's the answer to your question. Got it? Alderman Bram.
It's clear as mud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I as well was concerned about that. I don't see that written anywhere in the report. I assume then that's going to be translated in the ordinance.
Yes, that will be in the ordinance.
And that was definitely one of my concerns. The other concern is, I already mentioned, other two concerns was the amount. And I haven't heard a rationale of why we feel as a council that we would reimburse what I would deem, at least from what I read of the supporting material, the full rehab amount, if you would, for this facility. It was documented that it would be approximately $250,000 to make improvements to this facility. So why does the current recommendation feel that the City of Elmhurst residents should reimburse that full amount? And then the other proposal, especially due to the point that I didn't see anything in the report referencing a clawback, was the percentage. I know that in City Manager Grabowski is aware of this because he was village manager at the time in Manuka. There was a clawback provision for Clorox, and that was a different percentage amount. I believe it was 75, 50, and 25% over the 3-year period. So I would ask Mr. Chair, if I may, the committee to provide rationale on why a different percentage, a sheer percentage, be considered from the early years compared to the later years 5 through 10.
Mr. Chairman, you wish to answer any of that? Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I think I've answered a few of the things before, but with relative to the $250,000 that the alderman asked about, in the application, the applicant stated that there was $288,000 $89,000 with site improvements and renovation of existing structure. And also very clearly stated at the committee meeting the other night that there have been unexpected cost overruns. This is a building that basically was neglected for a good many years, and for example, they talked about going up to find out why the air conditioning wasn't working and finding that substantially the entire air conditioner was missing. So that wasn't something that was put into quote-unquote the budget. So these are the types of things that we heard in the committee meeting.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I would actually like to make a motion to amend the report, and I will do both at the same time to save some time. The first amendment would be to reduce the maximum total payout from $250,000 to $200,000, and then the second part of that amendment would be from the share perspective, instead of 50-50 from day one, for the first 5 years, the recommendation would be 60 to the city of Elmhurst and 40 to iMotorsports, and then after that, 6 through 10 would be a 50-50 split.
No, I know it needs a second. I know I also have it's also my, under my authority.
Oh, I see.
So Alderman Bram, as is the chairman's right, I am going to ask that these motions be split up and have separate votes.
Sure.
Okay, so I am going to entertain, the first motion is going to be motion to amend the report out of finance, and I don't believe there's anything else in here that would be affected by the first motion. So the motion would be to amend, 1, 2, 3, call it second bullet point under the third paragraph. Motion to amend maximum total payout from $250,000 to $200,000. You good with that, Clerk Spencer?
Yes.
I will entertain a second to this motion, which in effect reduces the maximum payout by $50,000. Do I have a second? Alderman Gutenkopf, with a second. So we have a motion before us to amend the report, reducing the maximum total payout to $200,000 from $250,000.
There's another.
No, I split the two.
You
I split the two.
Okay.
I believe Alderman Bram has made his case, but do you want to opine further on your reduction?
No, sir.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions as it relates to the motion to amend the report and reduce the maximum total payout to from $250,000 to $200,000? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Well, I just want to say that I agree that it's not the city's responsibility to pay nearly 100% of the renovation for a new business. That the cost of doing business is something that a business has to absorb. Do I think that the city should pay for, what is that, roughly 3/4 of it? I think that's still high, but it's not close enough to the 100% cited in the city's report. So in the interest of recognizing that a business like this brings new revenue to Elmhurst, but at the same time has to recognize that we're not, it's not our responsibility to pay for all of their renovation work, I support reducing the amount.
Okay. Alderman Hipskin.
As Chairman York stated, we're not spending, we're not financing or reimbursing for 100%. They've spent a lot more than $250,000 on this renovation, on taking this property from a distressed property to a viable business. It's been much, much more than $250,000.
Okay.
So just stated clearly, we're not, that's not an accurate
Okay.
for trail.
All right. Any other comments? Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to call for the vote, call the roll on the first proposal to amend maximum payout reduction from 250 to 200.
Graham.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
No.
Dunn.
No.
Leader.
No.
Palumski.
No.
Hipskin.
No.
York.
No.
Levin.
No.
Healy.
No.
Honquist.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
2 ayes and 12 nays.
2 ayes, 12 nays, that motion fails. Maximum payout remains at 250,000. Alderman Brand, would you like to continue and make a motion, the previous motion, yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a second motion to amend from Alderman Bram that would be to shift the current split of 50-50 to 60-40 tax receipt share, 60% Elmhurst, 40% iMotors for years 1 through 5, and revert to 50-50 years 6 through 10. That's the motion as I understand it. Mr. Bram?
Correct, Mr. Mayor.
Do I have a second?
Sure, why not?
Alderman Gutenkopf enthusiastically seconds the motion. Alderman Bram, I believe you've made your case. Would you care to opine further?
No further, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions as it relates to Alderman Gutenkopf? 60-40 share. You have the floor.
Well, this relates to the notion of clawback, that the longer it takes the business to recoup the money that to receive the payout from the city of Elmhurst, the more likely they are to stay in town.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll on the motion to amend the 50-50 to 60-40 in the first 5 years and 50-50 in the remaining 5. Clerk Spencer.
Graham.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
No.
Dunn.
No.
Leader.
No.
Palumski.
No.
Hipskin.
No.
York.
No.
Levin.
No.
Healy.
Aye.
All right, Honquist.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
Give everybody. That looks like 3 ayes and 11 nays.
3 ayes, 11 nays. Motion to amend fails. On to our original motion of approval of the report. Any other final comments with regard to the report itself? Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that I have visited this site a couple times already. I am glad to see iMotorsports in this location. It has, as some of the committee members have already stated, it has been vacant for a very long time. It is a welcomed improvement, but I also feel that we need to be very cautious with the tax dollars that we spend for any particular business as an incentive. So welcome to the city of Elmhurst, and you are a great addition to this corridor.
Okay.
A little bit of irony there, no? Any other comments as it relates to the report? Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
York.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski. Aye. Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Deuter.
Aye.
13 ayes, 1 nays.
13 ayes, 1 nay. That motion carries. That
It is.
completes the agenda items pulled off the consent agenda. On to agenda item number 7, committee reports. Committee Report 7.1. Clerk Spencer, could you please read the report and recommendation?
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Affairs and Safety Committee that the city attorney be directed to prepare the appropriate ordinance to remove in its entirety Municipal Code Section 31.137 and to amend Municipal Code Section 31.134 to reflect the changes outlined above. Signed by Patrick Wagner, Chairman, Norman Leader, Vice Chairman, and Michael Honquist.
Okay, before I ask for a motion, I'll remind the council that this report and recommendation was, by vote of the council, delayed until date certain, which is tonight, and it's appropriate for us to discuss it, and I will ask for a motion to put the report and approval of report and recommendation before the council. Motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Honquist. Sorry, I didn't see their Alderman Leader, but we'll stick with the motion, second by Alderman Honquist. Alderman Wagner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I would like to say that I do apologize for missing the previous meeting, Chair. Didn't actually anticipate that, but as you all know, life does sometimes happen. So I had the chance to review the last council meeting and the spirited debate around this topic of the ordinance change. I don't want to be haste, but I do think that there was enough debate that I think the topic is understood. So if there isn't anything new, I would suggest that we move this to the vote as fast as possible.
Okay, additional comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 weeks ago, I regretted voting to postpone this discussion to tonight. I regretted any part I might have played in delaying a business license for the hot dog lady. But tonight, I appreciate having had the time to read the documents Ms. Uslander provided to the City Council at our last meeting. I looked at the petition signatures she provided. But more importantly, I read each and every comment. I'm struck by how many people cited tradition and memories of visiting her cart, how much goodwill she generates for our downtown, and how concerned her customers are for her well-being and for her business. We, the City Council, make a big show of talking about how friendly Elmhurst is for business. We routinely give thousands of dollars to both existing and new businesses, citing how necessary these businesses are for our town's economic security. It's clear to me that we're only friendly to businesses we love or that we have some personal relationship with. We think motorcycles are cool, so we propose paying the entire cost of remodeling a business to bring them here. We love chicken sandwiches, so we underwrite a developer's everyday cost of doing business as a reward. But apparently we don't love small entrepreneurs, even well-established and successful ones. Here's a business that doesn't qualify for a facade grant because she doesn't have one. She's never asked us for a sales tax rebate so she could remodel. She just keeps doing her thing, selling hot dogs, sure, but mostly she's helping our downtown look vibrant and attractive. Let's examine for a minute the 4 existing pushcart locations in downtown. Of these 4, which one has a pushcart? Only the hot dog lady's current location. Why is this? I have to apply some of those economic principles I learned in school, and I come to the conclusion that if any of the other locations were attractive to pushcarts, Elmhurst would be bursting with the things. Only one location has attracted a pushcart, and that cart has had a 23-year history of economic success. Why do we want to muck with this? Are we so arrogant that we can assume moving this business will have no ramifications? Now, let's look at that purported safety issue. If this location is so unsafe, then what does the city plan to do with the pedestrians that want to access New Crepes? We built with the downtown facade grant money, a walkway set up with sidewalk cafe tables. We invite people to sit and linger in this space. Shouldn't we end this immediately for the same reasons we're forcing the hot dog lady to move? I've heard arguments that the garage construction will create unsafe conditions for the hot dog cart. This construction will literally be right on top of New Crepes and the people eating almost in the alley. Why is that okay? And finally, let's look at the sandwich board sign issue in downtown, because I think this is at the heart of the current matter. Bottom line, sandwich board signs are illegal, yet we seem to have developed a new tolerance of them. They're all over our downtown. Why do we ignore the New Crepes clearly illegal sign? It's placed right on the spot occupied by the hot dog lady. In fact, she's been there for decades. Why is it okay for an illegal sandwich board sign to be in the place where her cart should go? I've not heard, over the past several weeks, any arguments compelling enough for me to support moving this successful business to a new location. Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions? Alderman Deuter.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we're considering changes to an ordinance passed in 2004. I think at that time, there was concern that the proposed ordinance would negatively affect the vendors. After reading the minutes from 5 of the committee meetings in 2003 and 2004 when the issue was discussed, I believe that both the original ordinance and the changes currently being considered are designed to accommodate rather than negatively affect the vendors. Public attention with this review has been focused on the Schiller Walkway location. I think it's reasonable and appropriate to make changes to ensure the walkway is as accessible and inviting as possible. The walkway is a crucial mid-block connection between York and Addison, a corridor that's been identified as having the greatest potential for growth in our downtown. Improvements have been made to the facades along the walkway, and with the planned parking garage and streetscape improvements, it's expected that even more people will be utilizing the walkway in the future. I think the desired openness and increase in foot traffic won't really happen until the construction of the Addison deck is complete. So this is a vision for perhaps a year from now. Although I think it's possible to wait another year for the change, I don't think it makes sense to repeat this process next year. It's taken too much time and created too much uncertainty for vendors. I think it should be noted, as we've heard a bit about already, that the other issue affecting the openness of the walkway is the presence of sandwich board signs. I know that the issue of signage is currently under review, and I look forward to the opportunity to consider staff recommendations, hopefully in the near future.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Alderman Bram, a couple of brief comments.
Always, Mr. Mayor, always. As we debated this topic 2 weeks ago, I asked many direct and pointed questions about why the committee feels that there is a safety issue. In all due respect to Alderman Wagner's comments here tonight, I don't feel those questions have been answered, at least to my satisfactory, as we sit here. It keeps being discussed about this needs to be done now because there is a potential safety issue in the future. But we continue to sit here and say that a sign ordinance is being discussed, but we allow violations through our downtown and elsewhere day in and day out. As Alderman Gutenkauf already stated, and Mr. Chair, I would like to present a visual aid. As Alderman Gutenkauf has stated, the current New Crepes sign, even though the hot dog vendor cart is no longer there today, continues to remain in the exact location the current recommendation deems as a hazard. If this hazard is being deemed a pedestrian hazard, then why hasn't this sandwich board sign been removed to date? The current other sandwich board signs throughout the downtown area have been pushed alongside the building, but this one remains in the current location still today, where, another visual aid, Mr. Mayor, where the hot dog vendor location has always been over the past 23 years. Myself and Alderman Mulliner and others.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, is it a point of order or not,
Point
sir?
of order. I just want to see your things, I can't see them. Can you pass them around?
Sure.
Point of order.
Where was I? I really did lose my train of thought now.
We were discussing the number of licenses allowed for pushcart vendors.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, for that reminder. The current signs have been pushed alongside the building, but this sign has continued to stay in this spot. I don't understand on how this could be a safety issue if we have not seen any violations issued over the past 23 years to, in this case, the applicant for this license being the hot dog lady. There cannot be any proposed changes of an ordinance if we're not deeming this to be a safety issue with some facts and data behind it. As I was saying, prior to the point of order, Alderman Mulliner and myself and others on this council were on the dais when we discussed this 10 years ago and created this ordinance. These locations were deemed safe. That is what the committee discussed. That is why we located these locations in the city of Elmhurst. This past weekend, we see, Mr. Mayor, another visual aid, tables and chairs set up in the pedestrian walkway. But we're claiming that the hot dog lady, if in this relatively same location, is a hazard or is a safety issue because of the potential development of the Addison Street garage. Well, wouldn't the residents and folks who visit Elmhurst actually be in more of a danger since they would be closer to that proposed development? I don't see, and I have not heard any factual reasons on why this proposed location is a safety hazard. At this time, I would like to make a motion to amend the report. Oh, boy. To allow this the west side location remain, and you'll need to help me with the wording here, until construction commences, which would deem this to be a safety hazard. Might need to polish that up a
Yeah,
little bit.
Alderman Bram, I think we're going to need to polish that. Where, point to specifically where in the report you'd like to make the adjustment.
We're going to have to, it's probably going to need to be at the last paragraph of page 1 to remove the elimination of the west side location and to allow that location to remain until commencement of construction, which deems it to be a safety hazard. I believe that this would be an appropriate compromise until we see evidence.
Well, let's get a motion before we
sorry,
discuss the motion.
Sure.
Or a second. I got to figure out what we're doing here first. Oh. After this? Schiller Pass location east of.
To remove the following.
Oh, to remove the following locations. Yeah.
And his amendment.
Hold on one second.
Keep it.
And it does not refer to the Addison and Second Street, so it's only the Schiller Passage. So, Schiller East location. All right, Alderman Bram, I think it would be appropriate under A of the report to maybe put the caveat in there. You want to give it to me again about the construction? Motion to amend the report to reflect the following.
To reflect that item A on page 1 at the bottom of the page will remain until commencement of construction, which would deem this location a hazard.
To begin, or to be implemented,
To remain.
no.
Of the construction.
Remove the following locations, we can say, to be implemented upon the commencement of construction, I think is a clean way of doing it.
Sounds right.
But don't you have to keep it to be, instead of remove?
Excuse me, we'll handle this, thank you very much. Clerk Spencer, it's most important that Clerk Spencer understands the motion and that we know what we're voting on. I'm suggesting the motion be under Section A, Schiller Passage East, located at the intersection of York Street, that pedestrian walkway known as Schiller Passage, to commence, or to coincide with beginning of construction. Did you have anything besides it starting? Did you have an end?
What do you mean by starting or end?
Construction happens and it's done 2 years later. Do you want to, I mean, what,
That's what the rationale between saying until this location is deemed a safety hazard, because it would only be during that period of time of the
who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Until it's deemed no longer, until it's deemed safe or something.
Sort of, but-
Okay, Clerk Spencer, you got a handle on this?
I do, but don't ask me to repeat it.
All right. Is the council okay? And I hope I'm seeing nodding of heads. Everyone understands what Alderman Bram is trying to do?
Just have it want to clarify.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a
City
question.
manager.
Oh, sorry.
No, let me
Go on.
put the motion, we need a second. So I'm saying, is everyone okay with the motion being under Section A?
City manager helped me out
Great.
here. You
Go
want me to
ahead, read it.
Let's
A
see
motion
if
to
you-
amend Section A to include,
Schiller Passage East, located at the intersection of York Street and pedestrian walkway known as Schiller Passage. Once construction on Addison project begins,
Not Addison. Park.
Addison parking garage project begins. No, see, I heard like, keep it open, let it remain until the construction commenced, and that deem it
to begin.
not safety. As soon as it commences, the construction,
Yeah, but
then
it's-
you want to deem it unsafe.
But it's not relative to the Addison garage. I actually believe it's more relative to if there was any plas development.
Well, you didn't say that.
Regardless of construction, your motion is general construction, beginning of construction.
Why didn't you write this out before you
Point
came?
of order,
Oh,
Mr. Mayor?
okay. Yes, Alderman Gutenkauf.
Could we just say adjacent construction?
That's appropriate.
One last time, Alderman Bram.
Yeah.
Please clearly state your proposed amendment.
I would like to make a motion to amend item A to allow for the East Passage license until there commences adjacent construction to this area. That's horrible.
I didn't get all
Yeah. I'm going to read the motion.
that. Didn't get all-
Good luck.
Did you get that?
I'm just trying to put a condition on it.
Should have had it, but it, you know. We're supposed to have.
Alderman Bram proposes the following addition to Section A of the report. As the Schiller Passage, once construction begins adjacent to the location.
Is that it?
That's what we're going with.
Fine.
I think everyone understands it at this point. To begin, once adjacent construction begins. Do we have a second? Alderman Bram with a motion, a second.
I'm sorry, I'm still very confused. Could you just read it again?
Clerk Spencer, I would ask that you read the proposed motion and amendment.
Okay, the item A. Okay, he is wanting, Alderman Bram moved to amend item A, Schiller Passage East, located at the intersection of York Street and that pedestrian walkway known as Schiller Passage, once construction adjacent to the location begins.
I believe that's clear enough.
And which deems this location a safety hazard.
Alderman Bram, that's a second. You're adding to your motion now. That's not what you said earlier.
Yeah, it is.
I did initially.
Yeah, he did. To eliminate, Mr.
You know what,
Mayor,
Alderman Bram, you're either going to have to put this in writing or accept what we have here, because that's what we're supposed to do. If you want to make a motion to
Put 'em in
amend, you need to know
writing.
what it is. So I'm going to ask you to either write it and hand it to me, and I'll give you the time to do it, but I'm not doing this again.
Right. That's what he should have
We'll wait for Alderman Bram. He's going to submit it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
God, no.
Construction, commence, that would be section A.
No, actually, I think he's a crip or something. They're not putting much, might be the driver for that. Probably not gonna be,
Read my handwriting.
that's all that matters.
Be allowed to exist until adjacent
Make a motion to amend the following.
yes.
Be allowed to exist.
Oh, yeah, they're done. Until adjacent construction commences.
Exist until adjacent construction commences that would deem this location a safety hazard.
So we need to strike. I got a whole serve. Yeah.
It says remove the following.
I think we need to amend the language.
Yeah, that's why I want to do it here. I want to do it here. So can you make it say to commence?
If it could be, there's never, Lord.
Would that work?
To commence.
Well, if it's something that complicated. You should have
At the beginning
for the meeting.
of adjacent construction.
Yes, that would work great.
Passage. It's just basically clarify. It's not the best way to word it, but I don't want to have to rewrite this and
Well,
rewrite
yeah.
this. To commence at the beginning of adjacent construction
Well, then that would have to be removed, yeah.
that would deem this
This loca-
location a
that's
safety
perfect.
hazard. Is that fine?
Yep.
Okay. Let's be reminded this meeting's still in order. I'd ask the council for their indulgence. Alderman Bram has submitted an amendment to Report 7.1. His motion to amend is the following, Clerk Spencer. Under Section A, Schiller Passage East located at the intersection of York Street and that pedestrian walkway known as Schiller Passage to commence at the beginning of adjacent construction that would deem this location a safety hazard. That is the motion. Clerk Spencer, if you can read this writing, good luck.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, I have the floor. All of this could have been avoided if Alderman Bram would have had his motion ready and handed to the clerk before the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Bram, you have a motion before the floor. I've read it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Do we have a second on the motion before the floor? Alderman Gutenkopf seconds the motion. Any other comments as it relates to Alderman Levin?
My suggestion, and I appreciate what you've gone through to get your motion on the floor, Alderman Bram. But I think it just creates, it doesn't solve the problem we're going to have to address here. I don't know that adjacent construction will, who knows when it's going to begin? I thought the construction that was the concern of the safety issue was the Addison Street Garage. If it's the adjacent construction, may happen in some years, and I think even if the permit were to stand in the current location and construction really began, you tore down Place, you'd have to move it at that point. I don't think we should be taking a sidestep. I think we ought to address the issue, and for that reason, I would say I'm not going to be able to support the amendment.
Okay, any other comments? Alderman Leader.
I saw the visual aid that was passed by, and one of the visual aids was a picture of a hot dog stand sitting alone in front of the Schiller passageway. What was left out of the visual aid is that the Schiller passageway is about 15 feet wide. The immediate area has 6 planters, 2 trees, a tall sign, 2 benches, a trash can, and a traffic light. And that is without the presence of the hot dog lady.
Excuse me. Mr. Leader, please continue.
And that is without the presence of the hot dog lady and her hot dog wagon. Now throw in pedestrians, and customers into the mix, and people waiting to cross the street at the traffic light. And if that isn't congestion, then I don't know what is. I would also say that the city council has already voted to build a parking garage. It remains to be seen how high, but we've already done that. And we have committed to a legal, financial, and moral obligation. So we're going to do that. So that garage is going to be built sooner rather than later. And it is the building of that garage that is the justification and the ongoing congestion that will be at Schiller, at the other end where the garage is being built, that is the justification for doing this. So then, what I don't understand is why we are delaying it when the result is inevitable. It's like death and taxes. It's going to happen. It's like when death comes knocking at the door, you say, come back tomorrow. That's going to come back tomorrow. But there's no point in putting this thing off. Now, you have the hot dog lady here, and she's in the full flush of popularity, she's in the full flush of publicity. All we're asking her to do is move across the street. Nothing more, nothing less. We're not taking her business away, and I'm willing to bet anything she's going to do better across the street than where she is now. And she's been there not 23 years, but 10 years according to city staff and according to the clerk's office. So I cannot see that she will lose any business. But furthermore, what if somebody else applies for that plaza site? There's a real possibility that there will be, at some point, construction at Plaza. But what if somebody else takes that site away from the hot dog lady? Wouldn't she then be effectively barred from the business district? Is that the goal of what we're trying to do here? I thought the goal here was simply to move her across the street, give her more, not less business, not hurt her in the least. I can't understand how anybody gains from delay in this thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Bram?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will just state that nobody so far, nor the report, nor anyone on the dais, has clearly stipulated what the safety hazard is that we haven't seen anywhere from 10 or 23 years. The hot dog lady herself stated publicly tonight during the public forum that the buildings at the proposed Addison garage site were demolished without any safety hazard at that point in time due to her location today. The planters, the trash cans, and everything else that are relatively close to this location. I have a solution: move them. The intersection that has been referred to previously is actually 10 to 20 feet away from the current location that's on the ordinance, in the ordinance today. I continue to ask, what is the safety issue? It's not about barring this particular pushcart vendor. It's not about, I hope it's not about pushing all pushcart vendors out of the city of Elmhurst. But I continue to ask, and I continue to not get a clear answer, is what is the safety issue? The Addison garage on the other side of the block cannot be a safety issue when we demolished multiple buildings and there was no issue with this current pushcart vendor ordinance location last year. I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but I think it deems necessary to remind everyone, we've done this before. My current amendment, albeit difficult this evening to accomplish, proposed amendment, was done already. We've done it either for Brain Freeze or the other snow cone vendor a handful of years ago. It was done, where when we were doing, I think it was in 2008, the reconstruction of the downtown fountain area, we made the same restrictions, if you would, on the applicant. Once the construction commences, they cannot currently utilize that location. What is different today? We continue to talk about pushing out this vendor out of town or not pushing the vendor, or we know what's best for this vendor, that it's a better location for this business on the other side of the street. Who are we to speak to that? We should be looking at the push cart vendor ordinance and the safety of the current locations. I would continue to ask, what is the safety issue of this side of the street? It can't be the Addison Garage, because we just set up tables and chairs for people to sit there and eat in that location. So if we're concerned with that construction beginning anytime this summer, why are we going to all of a sudden pull those tables and chairs when that becomes a safety issue? It can't be because of the intersection, because we've had no issues with that to date. It's been 10 years at this location and not one written violation from the city of Elmhurst on this current vendor for this current location. Please define what is the safety location. Otherwise, let's have a compromise and move forward if we are trying to make a change to this current ordinance on what we think may happen down the road. Let's sit here and compromise and allow this vendor to utilize the current locations in the current ordinance starting tomorrow. Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll on the motion to amend. Do you want to give us a shot on the actual amendment?
Do I have to?
I can do it. You want me to do it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, at this point, I think you better.
Motion to amend the current report under Section A, Schiller Passage East located at the intersection of York Street and that pedestrian walkway known as Schiller Passage to commence at the beginning of adjacent construction that would deem this location a safety hazard. Amendment by Alderman Bram, second by Alderman Gutenkopf. Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Bram.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
No.
Dunn.
No.
Leader.
No.
Polumsky.
No.
Pipskin.
No.
York.
No.
Levin.
No. Oh, sorry.
Healy.
No.
Conquest.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
2 ayes, 12 nays.
2 ayes, 12 nays. That motion to amend fails. On to the original motion before us. Motion to approve report 7.1 on the agenda. Motion by Alderman Wagner, second by Alderman Honquist. Any additional comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Hey, I do have
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Alderman Gutenkopf, you had an additional comment.
I just want to hammer home one final point. I'm not clear why we're moving her if we have absolutely no idea when the construction's going to start. I
Okay.
just think it's silly.
Any other comments?
Here, Mr. Mayor, there's too much noise.
I would remind the members of the audience, it's difficult for us to hear up here, and I would ask, as stated by our code, to refrain from conduct that interferes with the business we're doing up here. Thank you very much.
Let me call the roll.
No, Alderman Dunn, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks would agree that this particular spot downtown is the most busy thoroughfare in the downtown area. We have York Street and we have the Schiller Passage. It will continue to grow in use, and city staff has looked at this and thinks it's constructive to alleviate this obstruction in that area. I've been down in that area on nice Saturday afternoons. It's quite lively, quite busy, especially right there. The committee debated this several times and also felt that to be a reasonable course of action. So I would support the committee report to, in essence, reduce the number of locations for vendors from 3 down to 1 in the center of town.
Oh, yeah, okay. Any other comments? Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Wagner.
Aye.
Conquest.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Nope.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
No.
Bram.
No.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
No.
Healy.
Aye.
10 ayes, 4 nays.
10 ayes, 4 nays, that motion carries. Report is approved. On to agenda item 7.2. Report out of the Finance Committee pertaining to finance referendum referral. Clerk Spencer, I would ask that you read the recommendation.
Okay, 7.2. It is therefore the recommendation of the Finance, Council Affairs, and Administrative Services Committee that the City Council reject the request for an Addison parking deck financing referendum, signed by Kevin L. York, Chairman, Bob Dunn, Vice Chairman, Stephen W. Hipskin, and Marty Deuter.
Okay, a motion to approve recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Dunn. Alderman York, this is a report out of your committee. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. The report is, as one of the committee members said, saying less says more. We spent quite a deal of time in committee discussing this, and it all boiled down to the fact that this agreement, the development agreement, was approved over 5 years ago. Actions have been taken by the city since then pursuant to that agreement to further the development, and based on those two facts, we all agreed that going forward with a referendum was not a wise course of action.
Okay. Any comments? Any additional comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Oh, I've got a comment. Because this was a referendum that I sent to the committee, which seemed to miss the point about it being advisory. We were asking residents to weigh in on our spending money. We had a resident comment earlier about 3 communities that have been in the news an awful lot lately. Bridgeview and Lyons, Lombard maybe not so much, because they issue an awful lot of GO bonds without resident support, and they seem to have gotten in a little bit of trouble about it. Just because we're home rule doesn't take away the right of voters to decide how and if we should be spending money, or at least to give them the opportunity to weigh in publicly en masse. Just because they elected us to sit up here doesn't mean that they've given us powers of kings. We give them the opportunity to weigh in on expanding libraries and schools. These things always go to a vote. But by a quirk of population, we're a home rule community. And so they don't get the chance to say that. I don't know what the Finance Committee was afraid of. There are hundreds of ribbons tied on trees around town because people care about what's going to happen. And that's how they feel they have to. And that's how they feel they have to communicate that with us. I'd like to give them a stronger voice in that. I'd like to have given them the opportunity to have this on a ballot. Is the fact that this project has been in the works for years relevant? No, we don't have any drawings, there's no plans. It's not gonna break ground tomorrow. I don't think the time difference between when all that finally happens and the November ballot is going to be significant. This is just an unfortunate decision, and residents still have an opportunity to petition for this option. Will they do it? I don't know. I was going to give them kind of a shortcut opportunity to that. I think it's unfortunate. Thank you.
Alderman Levin.
You know, when I saw this, I understand that it's always good to get the input from the residents, but this one is extremely ill-advised. We're under contract to build a garage, and I think it's very misleading for us to put an advisory referendum out onto the public with the idea that they think they have any real voice in an advisory referendum when the decision has already been made and has been voted by this council repeatedly. So to put it out there and have the possibility that whether they say yes, that it had any real impact, or if they say no, that we're not listening, we have a contract. We'll get sued if we don't perform. There's been more public input on this particular project than most projects I'm aware of. So it's not because we don't care about what the public says, it's because we're under contract, we've moved forward, and we have had tremendous public input. I spent about 3.5 hours reading page after page after page of public input, so you can't say we don't have it.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Dunn.
This particular project, to date, we've spent $5.3 million. Most of that is to acquire the land, and about $700,000 of that was to prep the site. Going back to 2008 and taking guidance from our downtown plan, our comprehensive plan, previous councils have viewed this issue and debated it and refined their approach on whether to put some type of parking structure in the downtown. And in the packet tonight, there's a timeline of how that's been discussed again and again and continue to be approved. I have concerns with retroactively trying to seek a referendum on large-scale projects. We have several large-scale projects that are in various stages of execution. Our Southwest Elmhurst wet weather facility, it's over a $10 million project. Are we to expect a referendum midstream on that? I don't think that would be advised either. That's something that committee, Public Works Committee, the council has spent a long time assessing, gathering public input and city staff input to come up with a solution. This particular, there's also our stormwater initiatives, which are budgeted at $9 million right now. Another one where we're starting to investigate projects and move forward with those. I think everyone's aware of our stormwater issues in town. So this particular parking need was identified years ago, and that is still something that is impending. That need is going to grow, and to try to put out a referendum now is just way too late, in my opinion. Thanks.
Any other comments? Anybody who hasn't spoken yet? Alderman Gutenkopf.
I think what changed in the past, since 2008, when we started this project, is the height of the parking garage and the additional costs. I'm kind of surprised that the Finance Committee couldn't see beyond the totality of the project to understand that what we really want residents to weigh in on is the total amount of how much we spend. The fact that it's going to 6 stories. The fact that over the past 4 years, the last year or so is the really crucial part. That's where this project ballooned. That's where the costs started to go up. That's where everything changed. So yeah, things did change. They changed a lot from the beginning. We had a contract to build a 4-story parking deck that morphed into with offices that now is just a 6-story project. So, I don't know. Don't tell me nothing changed. Everything changed. Things change all the time. We change our minds.
Okay, any other comments as it relates to motion before us? Seeing none, I'd ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
York.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Tipskin.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
No,
Was that a no?
that's a no.
Deuter.
Aye.
Oh, okay. Got it. 12 ayes, 2 nays.
12 ayes, 2 nays, that motion carries. Report and recommendation is approved. Agenda item 7.3. Majority report out of DP&Z. Clerk Spencer.
It is therefore the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee that they recommend the City Council approve the applicant's request for conditional use and associated variations. The city attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval, with the loading and commuter parking conditions modified as stated in this report. Signed by Scott N. Levin, Chairman, Mark A. Mulliner, Alderman, 7th Ward, and unsigned by Danny Polonsky, Vice Chairman.
Motion to approve the report as read. Alderman Mulliner with a motion, Alderman Leader with a second. Alderman Mulliner.
This is one of the biggest decisions that we're going to have to make at this council level for a long time. This is the decision that can set the direction for where we're going downtown. I know most of the people, in fact, everybody on the council understands the critical need to keep the downtown vibrant. And the way that you have to do that, as we all know, is to create what I refer to and what most economists will refer to as a captive audience. And in order to have that captive audience there, we need to provide that necessary parking. The captive audience, though, we have to keep in mind, is not just in the evenings, it's also during the days. So we have to look to the future. And if we don't look to the future to have some type of office complexes down there that drive people down there and have to rely on parking in that area, it will make it so that we're not capable of sustaining the downtown that we currently have. Restaurants can't survive on dinner alone. They have to survive on lunch crowds, they have to survive on breakfast crowds. And offices are a critical component of that. And if you look at the downtown today, you'll look at the areas where redevelopment can easily be done, where we'll continue to have the retail on the first floor, and we could have on the second, third, fourth floors, offices, which then will provide for us that necessary development in the downtown area. This all relates to parking because of the fact that if we don't have the parking, we can't put offices in. If we don't have the offices, we don't have the density we need downtown, and therefore our economic development doesn't succeed the way that we envision it as a city council. And I know all of us want the downtown to succeed because the more tax dollars we get in on a downtown, the less the tax burden on the individual homeowner. That's what my focus has been all along. That's what I'll continue to have as my focus. So I strongly support the concept of this 6-story, and that's the reason why I've signed this report and will continue to push for a 6-story parking deck.
Alderman Leader, and I would remind people, please speak into the microphones. I know it's getting late, but I want to be able to hear what we're saying here. Alderman Leader, then I'll go to Alderman Polonsky.
There's a welcome unanimity of spirit on the council for the need to build a garage on Addison Street. The only question left to determine is the height of that garage. The actual cost of the construction and design of a 4-story garage is approximately $11.5 million. The actual cost of a 5-story garage is approximately $13 million. And the actual cost of a 6-story garage is approximately $14.5 million. Since 2008-9, the city has paid out $5.4 million in cash for land acquisition, demolition, utility relocation, and engineering. Clearly, we have passed the point of no return on this project. Should we decide to construct a 6-story garage, we would issue approximately $12 million in low-interest payment AAA bonds. The bonds would be a long-term asset to be repaid in 20 years. Not $1 will appear on your property tax bill. And these numbers are accurate, conservative, and verifiable. This debate is really about the future viability of our downtown, the value of our homes, and the continuing existence of our city as a desirable place to live. For no city has a future without a viable and thriving downtown. And no downtown can remain viable without a free and abundant parking. We not only need parking for commuter access to
Excuse me,
the...
Alderman Leader. I'm going to remind the audience again that you're prohibited from engaging in any activity that distracts from the work that we're doing up here. And I'm telling you right now, I can hear you better than I can hear Alderman Leader. And I know that goes for other people up on the dais. Please, out of respect for what we're trying to do tonight, refrain from speaking. Thank you. Alderman Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We not only need parking for commuter access to the metro, but also to sustain and lure new business into our downtown. A viable downtown is a powerful retail sales tax engine that creates new sources of revenue, which helps to relieve the burden on the existing taxpayer base. The downtown is the keystone that holds the whole edifice of Elmhurst together. Elmhurst, without a vibrant and retail tax-producing downtown, will become a smaller and much less interesting place, with lower housing values, fewer vital services, fewer policemen, and firefighters. Does anyone have a proposal for making time stand still? If so, how is that to be accomplished? Does anyone believe that the population will not grow from what it is today? Perhaps we should not plan for any population growth, or should we pass an ordinance limiting the number of children that parents may have? In the near future, a growing regional and local population accompanied by increasingly crippling traffic congestion will entice people to stay closer to home, to shop, dine, work, and live downtown. Though it has not reached its full potential, there are, after all, natural limits to the growth of the downtown. This will be the last time we will ever be called upon to provide more parking. In doing so, we must look beyond the immediate. Let us look to Elmhurst past for guidance, for history does in fact repeat itself. In the past, we built less, only to add more at great cost. We cannot set the clocks back to some earlier Elysium, some ideal place that exists only in myth and dim memory. Though I certainly hope someone can stop time, for at my age, I would be very interested. I favor 6 stories because I don't want to repeat the costly mistakes of the past. And to build less would be telling developers not to believe in our future because we ourselves do not believe in our future. Do not make a mistake here. This is the thing to do now. We are the keepers of the flame. Beware the angel of history who flies backward with her face frozen in a look of appalled regret, beating her wings in silent protest. This is less about build it and they will come, but more about don't build it and they will leave. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Later. Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a motion to substitute the minority for the majority report.
Okay, we have a motion to substitute the minority report, which is 7.4 on our agenda. Substitute the majority report for the minority report, and we have a second by Alderman Levin. Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank city staff, the commission, the council, and everybody that we've heard from on this project. There's been a lot of information to review, and I appreciate the information we've been given, and I appreciate the points of view for all heights of this project. I think it's time to put the decision to bed so we can wake up and get a fresh start and get a shovel in the ground. I urge my fellow aldermen to vote for the minority report, and I do not see 5 stories as a mistake. I do not take issue with 65-foot tall buildings in our downtown. As a general rule, I do believe height has its place in our central business district, but I think this project is best suited as a 5-story development. Though several arguments can be made for 5 stories over 6, I want to focus on necessity. We should strive to accommodate future parking needs and entice businesses. That is achieved with the 55-foot deck and is supported by the parking study and the downtown plan. The parking study proceeds with the assumption that every downtown site is fully developed and operational. I recognize the summary of probable land use is optimistic, but I embrace that, and I believe Elmhurst has a sunny future, so I will take a look at this with those same assumptions. Though other parts of the parking study could be scrutinized, I'm going to focus on one, the number of necessary spaces projected to accommodate future development. The number of required spots per type of use varies across municipalities and settings. Retail parking requirements alone vary even here. We require 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of retail in C4A, which is between 3rd Street and North Avenue in our downtown. Our council has allowed businesses throughout town to provide fewer spots than indicated in our code. Some municipalities consider a range, for example, of 2 to 3 spots. If we required 3 spots for retail instead of 4 as indicated, we would have a future deficit of 245 spots instead of 326. Looking at the project overall, though, the parking study states that there is an anticipated deficit of 612 spaces. Even with the parking requirements that are used for the study, this is very close to the 575 spaces provided by a 55-foot parking deck. In fact, the parking report states at least 5 floors of parking above the first floor would be needed, and so that's using the most generous numbers for parking requirements. With our downtown plan's multiplier, which we created in our downtown plan, a number that we believe is adequate to provide parking for our downtown businesses. If we use a multiplier of 3.08 spots per 1,000 square feet of mixed use, we are at 556 spots, well under the 575 in a 5-story deck. But if you're not convinced by the numbers, consider convenience. Just as the parking study points to level of service and recognizes that shoppers will only walk so far to park, our downtown plan states that parking options should incorporate both area parking and point of demand parking. The parking study says that one of the most important factors is walkability. What isn't addressed, but seems to be common sense, is that there is a point at which it becomes more convenient to park at another address than 6 stories up a parking deck. I can't tell you the height trigger for that, especially in a town like Elmhurst. It's not that we're in a big city where people are more willing to park higher up, but I would contend that 6 stories is too high up to park in our community. Though we are the co-applicant for this project and have been familiar with it for some time, before us is the opportunity to take an unbiased look at tonight's decision. Since this project's inception, more information has been presented, we have heard from additional stakeholders, and design plans have been refined. If we can come together to support a 55-foot structure, we can fully accommodate future parking needs and demonstrate our commitment, as indicated in the downtown plan, to fulfilling our role in ensuring downtown is a popular cultural and entertainment venue. I ask for your support. Thank you.
Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mayor. For those who might be a little confused of why I'm speaking on the minority report, a lot of information has been made available. It was the will of the council for a 6-story application to go in, and I supported that after a failed motion once before to try for a 55-foot structure. But the additional information has made me reconsider that, not to in any way diminish the hard work of our Zoning and Planning Commission. I think there's enough evidence that was presented to justify a 65-foot structure. I just think now looking at it more carefully, the 55-foot structure is more appropriate. There's no doubt we're building for the future. Currently, there's on-street parking on Addison, both on the west side of the street and where the future garage is going to be located. And on any given time, you can drive by and there's parking available. We're providing parking because it's part of a development concept, because parking is attractive for development. As Alderman Leader said in a different way, if it's there, developers will come, they'll understand that they put in a business and that there's going to be parking to accommodate the shoppers, the diners, whatever. So, and there's a lot of room for development on Addison Street. If you look up and down that street, there's vacant spaces, there's buildings that are tired and could be replaced. There's been discussion about the character of Addison Street, and I'm not sure what that character is. It's not York Street, it's not developed with a lot of shops, and that character might be different. We don't know what's going to come there. It remains to be seen. There's no, so why 5 versus 6? The parking study, as Alderman Polumsky touched upon, I think is the lead indicator for me of why 5, and I'll try not to repeat what she's already said. But the thrust of my argument is that 5 stories will meet the needs of future development, and that the 6-story, 65-foot plan is overstated. The parking study reminds me a bit of a real estate appraisal. You hire an appraiser and you say, I need you to appraise this property, and the appraiser says, how much did you pay? And you say $370,000, and lo and behold, your appraisal comes in remarkably close. And I'm not saying that it wasn't a quality parking study. I read it carefully, I think we all did, but I do think that there was a lead-in for what we wanted. The requirements for different types of space are stated in the staff report from January 17th of this year. Retail/office, 3.6 and 3.8 spaces respectively. Restaurant, 10.5 spaces. Entertainment, 18 spaces. So if you keep the difference between retail office, which to keep it simple at about 3.7 spaces, restaurant at 10.5, entertainment 18. The study assumes 57,500 feet of retail, 23,000 of restaurant and entertainment. That's also in the same staff report. This assumes that 1/3 of future development will be restaurant and entertainment. Our current downtown occupied space isn't even 15% restaurant and entertainment. So to assume a 33% development of restaurant and entertainment belies anything that exists in the history of our downtown. This assumption has a huge impact on parking need predictions. If you reduce restaurant and entertainment to 15% of new space, and it's really less than that, then the 10,500 square feet is what you're going to have of restaurant as opposed to 23,000. This would reduce the need for parking spaces by 120 spaces. 120 spaces is remarkably close to one floor being 115 spaces. Note that our downtown plan has an existing ratio stated of 3.03 spaces per square foot, or 3.48. But let's keep it simple, 3 or 3.5 if you include commuter parking. That same downtown plan that we have notes that the Chicago metro area in total, the suburban area, has an existing ratio of 2.5 to 3.5 spaces, suggesting that the 3.08 that we've used for our plan parallels the experience in other communities. Again, the restaurant entertainment assumption, which doesn't really have any basis stated, causes a huge shift in anticipated and predicted parking needs. So we need to consider the amount of space also that we have in our downtown area, and I want to sort of show you what it compares with to other garages. Now, we had a PowerPoint presentation, and if it's 6 stories, I'll skip 4 because it's not part of the discussion, 690 spaces, 575 at 55 feet, or 5 stories. So, and as Alderman Plumsky pointed out, if the parking study suggests a deficiency of 612, that's closer to the 575 than it is to the 690. But here's what we have downtown right now in our big parking garages. Larch, 253 spaces. Schiller, 311. Adelaide, 263. If you add them all up, that's 827 spaces. At 65 feet, this one garage will have about 85% of the total parking that exists in all 3 of the other garages combined. Think what kind of parking need we're predicting there. 55 feet will meet our future needs. The study assumes that there'll be no new development that has its own parking. If the Charter One Bank is torn down and someone puts something in there, it may well include its own parking for the convenience of its customers. The restaurants and entertainments, if they come to the level they develop, may not want their people to drive up to the 6th floor of a building. They may have valet parking, and that's common in the entertainment industry as well. So if there's a shortage between 5 and 6, it's only going to be slight, and it doesn't mean we need to overbuild. The danger of having a slight deficit is not critical. And it's also been talked about by some of the commentators about rush hour. Do we build a highway to meet the needs of rush hour? Well, I wish they would, because I drive downtown, but we don't. And so if there's 1 hour during the day where there's a parking shortage, it doesn't mean you build a whole nother story. I want to talk a little bit about the fallacy of the adding on argument. We talked about 2 garages and we made a big mistake. We didn't build tall enough. Well, it's all relative. As I said, Schiller has 311 spaces, Adelaide 263 spaces. Those are the 2 we added on. Addison will have 575 spaces right off the bat, more than double that Adelaide had on day 1, and 1.85 times what Schiller has. Those 2 garages were remarkably underbuilt. We're talking about, whether it's 4, 5, or 6, a very big garage compared to the other ones. The cost. Yeah, it's a $12 million project. For whatever's been said about Bridgeview and how they wasted their money away, this is a responsible project, but the difference is $1.5 million per floor. That's still a good chunk of money. And to save $1.5 million for a project that can't really be justified for these spaces is a lot of money to bet on the come. 5 stories makes sense. It allows for and it encourages a future development. No one who's coming to town is going to say, gee, I'd like to build something in town here, but when I looked at it, I saw, and I met with the city manager, he said there'll only be 575 spaces available, not 690. It's not going to influence a decision. Again, if it's short a few spaces, it's no big deal. You save $1.5 million. On the soft side, despite the suggestion of a referendum, there has been significant public input. And since the zoning commission hearing, I feel that a number of people have expressed a preference for a smaller garage. Yeah, 55 is halfway between 45 and 65, but that's not the basis of the logic itself, although it's a good compromise position. It's the baby bear of parking garages. Not too big, not too small, it's just right. Now, 6 stories I can only support if it had an ice rink on top. I know that's not going to happen, but I feel quite strongly that if you look at what we've got here in terms of the data, in terms of the needs, and the cost, 55 feet, is the project that makes sense for our community. I thank you.
Okay. Additional comments? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start my comments by saying I'm going to be brief, which means from my comments a few meetings ago, hunker down, I'm going to be here a while. I have been on the fence for months on 5 or 6. I have been on the dais. I've been very upfront about that. On the meetings I've had or individual discussions I've had with aldermen about where I was at, I've been very clear on the fact that I was firmly on the fence when it came to 5 or 6. I'd remind the council that when the council voted to send the request to go to 6 stories to zoning and planning a few months ago, several months ago, in my comments I said we should ask for 6, and we can always come down from that. And so I appreciate Alderman Polumsky's minority report, because that as I suggested then and is the case now, we have an option. Now, some argued against me at that time, and some vociferously so, that if we wanted to send 6 to the zoning and planning, we should stick to 6, that we should be upfront with our request to zoning and planning. I didn't agree at the time, but regardless, we are where we are here today. I agree with a lot of what Alderman Levin said, and I disagree with it. Like I said, I was on the fence up until about 2 o'clock today. I agree with Alderman Levin's comments about the fallacy of building onto this deck. We're not going to build onto this deck whether we put it at 5 or 6 stories. I don't believe that we will. That's my opinion. The reason we built onto previous decks was because they were built at 1 or 2 stories. We're not going to build onto this. On the other hand, I disagree with Alderman Levin to some degree on $1.5 million. Sure, it's a lot of money. Sure, we could not spend $1.5 million by keeping it at 5. However, I think back to a conversation, a decision this council made just a couple months ago regarding Hahn Street. This council voted then to leave $3.5 million on the table in lieu of a more neighborhood-appropriate building that fit better, setbacks, all reasons that this council agreed with. So if this council at that point was willing to leave $3.5 million on the table for a taller building that was more neighborhood-appropriate, I think it stands a reason that if this council chooses to build a 6-story deck, that $1.5 million by comparison is worth the investment for whatever reason you may believe we need 6 stories. So with all that said, where do I shake out? I'm going to support the minority report for 5 stories. I honestly came to that decision at 2 o'clock today. I don't think 5 or 6 matter. I honestly don't. I don't think developers are going to come here because we build a 6. I don't think they're not going to come here if we build a 5. I don't think businesses are going to leave here if we don't build a 6, or they're going to stay because 5 or 6, we're going to accomplish a lot of what we want to do, which is, for all the reasons that have been stated or will be stated, we need more parking in downtown Elmhurst. So then, how did I come to my decision? And for me, it was as simple as building a 5-story deck will make that building the prominent building on Addison Street for a couple of years, a few years, until development catches up. I think that's appropriate. Could we be short of parking per the study or per some of what some of the aldermen have said? Yes, we might be short of parking per a code, per a figure, per a study, but we're not going to be short until the developments fill in, which may take us 8, 9, 10, 12 years. We're going to lose, if we approve a 5-story deck, we're going to lose approximately 100-some parking spots. We can account for that down the road. Not saying we have to build another deck, but with another development, we can find a place to put another 100 parking spots down the road when development catches up. So I agree with Alderman Levin that we would be building a middle bear of a parking deck, not too big, not too small. It's appropriate for here and now. It's appropriate for down the road. And should down the road we need additional parking, whether it's 100 spots or 200 spots, we can account for that down the road. So for that reason,
I will support the minority report.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Alderman Healy's comments, and Alderman Levin's comments as well. I really appreciated Alderman Leader's comments. This always comes back for me to the money. And as Alderman Levin had stated, Chair, that it's $1.5 million per floor. I don't understand, and I'm pretty convinced we've got a track record of sizing things too small. And I believe, my opinion is that it will come back. We will have to add on to this 5-story. And it might not be 6, it might have to be 7. So, I mean, I go back to the fact, where's our fiduciary responsibility to the residents of Elmhurst? I think it's making the right choice now, while we can, while they're under construction. I think now's the time to actually do 6 stories. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Deuter?
Thank you, Mayor. Clearly, we want to be forward-thinking to accommodate the growth of our downtown. That is the reason we've pursued this project. As we think about parking needs in the future, it's reasonable to assume that the public's preference to park adjacent to a destination will not change. The newest development on Addison, which is the medical building at the corner of 2nd and Addison, acknowledges this preference, despite the existence of ample parking in the municipal lot less than half a block away on the same side of the street. The developer of the medical building opted to provide approximately 30 spaces of on-site parking. As available parcels are redeveloped, I think it's safe to assume that some level of parking will be provided on-site whenever possible. As much as I would like to see this development be no greater than 45 feet, I think 55 feet is a better reflection and acknowledgement of our community's priorities than a 65-foot structure. I will vote for the structure at 55 feet, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same.
Additional comments, Alderman Bram?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will keep my comments brief. It is late, and a lot has been said already this evening. Alderman Levin, Alderman Healy, and others have made some very valid points. I think those valid points in regards to a 55-story parking, 55-foot, see, it is late, parking deck would be also applicable, at least in my mind, to what I believe and still stand strongly about for a 45-foot parking structure. So therefore, I would like to make a motion to amend. Yes, sir?
I don't believe a motion to amend. Go ahead, I'm sorry, finish your motion, I don't mean to interrupt you. I don't know if it'll be in order. Go ahead, I will check.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to amend the 2 spots in the current recommendation that currently state 55 feet to, I believe the accurate number for 4-story deck would be 45 feet, and that is on page 1, the last paragraph, and also on page 2, the first paragraph. If that needs to be in writing, I can do so.
Mr. Mayor, that's in our local rules, our ordinance amendments.
Excuse me?
Hold on a second, Alderman Bram.
Understood, I just wanted to hear what he said.
It's X towards the bottom. Second to last paragraph of X.
Motion to amend motions, yeah, shall be in order. However, any motion to amend have been acted upon, and no motion to amend shall not be in order. So it has been acted on.
Substituting the minority.
Motion has been acted upon. The question is, motion to substitute a motion to amend.
do that.
Yeah, but it's,
Am I right?
The question is a motion to substitute a motion to amend. You can't amend an amendment. That is not allowed until the First Amendment is acted on.
but we have to decide first if the report is, we have to know which one we're going to amend.
That's why I'm wondering, 2 motions to amend are not in order. Technically, this is a motion to substitute and a motion to amend. Just give me a second.
Point of order, I'll withdraw.
Very good. Problem solved.
It's the this.
I think your motion to amend, if you want to, Alderman Bram? You can still achieve what you want to achieve after this is...
I jumped the gun. Yes.
Got it? Okay. So we are still discussing the substitute motion, and Alderman Bram, are you finished? You said therefore I will amend, but I assume you're done with your comments at this time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other comments as it relates to Alderman Dunn?
We're talking about 55 feet for a 5-story building, 65 feet for a 6-story building. The number that I'd like you to think about is 548 feet. I was raised in a small town out east by the name of Philadelphia, and we had not an ordinance, but an agreement to not build above 548 feet in that city. I remember going down there when I was young, downtown. City Hall was actually the largest building in Philadelphia. And the 548 feet was the top of William Penn's hat. That is as tall as you could build in Philadelphia for many, many years. And I think people were used to that and respected it. And with development, a lot of people with proposals to go higher than that traditional ceiling, there was quite an uproar. I recall it when I was young, that was something that would disturb a lot of people, that's out of character. Our founding fathers of that city put that in there for legitimate reasons, and that is the character of the city. To build higher than that would have been irreverent to their wishes. Let's jump ahead to now. In that same city, in 1984, that was lifted. That agreement was lifted, or not enforced anymore. There are now 8 structures much taller than 548 feet, with 6 more approved and under construction. That has helped with the vibrancy and the economic development of that city. I was there last month on a college visit with my son, and it was quite evident that it's a lot different than when I was young going into Center City, Philadelphia. So although it's thinking out of the box a little bit, having something a little bit taller, I think it could work. And what that did is it allowed tens of thousands of more people to work and live in the downtown, to increase the vibrancy in that particular city. So how does that relate to Elmhurst? I look at a particular comment in the study, the parking study, and also in the comprehensive plan, that in the center of town, our city center, parking is a finite resource. And we have spent $5.3 million to date on that Addison site to acquire the land, to demolish what's there, and prep the site. And what do we get after $5.3 million? We have a piece of dirt we can build on. If we were to undersize this particular lot, this parking deck, and we needed to do this again, we'd be confronted with that same type of investment. And the $1.5 million per floor certainly will be a lot higher in the future. I believe right now we don't need a parking deck today, but we do need it in the future. We need it 5, 6, 7, 8 years in the future, and we can also utilize that structure to shutter some of city parking that exists downtown to further develop those lots and move that capacity into this particular lot. I don't think, I appreciate point-of-demand parking. Heck, I like to go and park right in front of the store, get in there, pick up my shoes that were shined, and then get right home. That's a great thing, and in non-peak times, that's feasible. I went down to Champaign to visit my daughter a few weeks ago, and their parking is pretty darn tight down there. I drove all over town, and thank God there was a parking garage just a few blocks from where she lived that was about 5 or 6 stories high. So it's not a bad thing to have such a structure. I believe that we're going to need this, and it's something that we should invest in now. It's financially responsible, and I agree that businesses in the next few years aren't going to move here or not move here because it's 5 or 6 stories. But down the road, we are going to need that capacity. If the minority report should pass, I won't be completely disappointed. I think it's a great thing to get this project underway. However, I won't support that. I support 6 stories. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Alderman Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try to be brief. In the end, one group is going to be right and one group's going to be wrong. That's the way it's going to be. The answer is that we're not going to get that answer for probably 10 or 20 years. What we do know is that where we live is going to continue to become more urbanized as we go forward. We also know there's going to be greater population density in our cities and our suburbs as we go forward. Our history is we're 1 for 3 on parking decks, folks. And with the difference of $1.5 million over the life of the project is very small in my books. If we need more parking, we're not going to add on to the 5-story deck. But what we're going to probably end up doing is taking a parcel of land that has great value that could be used for some other purpose, like a building, like for tax revenue, and we're going to take that and we're going to make that into parking. That's our opportunity cost here, difference between going to 6 versus capitulating and going to 5. I think it's money well spent. Yes, it's $1.5 million, but it's $1.5 million over probably the course of the next 50 years. For those of us that have been in town for any measure of time, we know that downtown is York Street. There really has nothing that's ever really gone on Addison Street. And if we want something to go on, we need to build parking because that's the #1 concern of businesses. I think we go to 6 because it's the right thing to do long term and let history figure out where we end up. Thank you.
Alderman Bram.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one comment. It's been mentioned a couple times tonight that we've made mistakes in the previous parking decks, and I made this correction in the past since I was here when those decisions were made. And I believe other aldermen who were here at that time could also concur with my statement. They weren't mistakes. We consciously made the decision to build it incrementally over time as the need came across. They weren't mistakes. I just want to make sure this is clear. This was decisions made by past councils to build them at a shorter level and then add on to them when there was a need. So I don't want that to be misunderstood and false pretenses that mistakes were made, because at least I was told by city administration at the time that if it was needed, we will continue to add to the decks of the past.
Alderman York.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think Alderman Healy made a lot of valid comments, and I certainly agree very strongly with Alderman Kennedy. As time moves on, you get into some new tenants and new uses for buildings, and I've poured over the past couple days the original report, the comments back from the parking consultant, on some of the questions, great questions that were asked by committees and public and whatnot. And then I come across a Congress for New Urbanism, and recognizing that the area devoted to entertainment, restaurant, and cinema uses just requires more parking than offices and those types of uses. So with that being said, and we don't know how the development is going to occur, I think that closer to 5 is a more valid number, and I will support a 6-story deck. I think when you're looking at it as $1.5 million is a lot of money, and to Alderman Healy's point, as Alderman Kenny suggested, yes, we can move that down the road, but we're probably going to take some really great development and hamstring it in some regard by having to have parking in there. Make it either the city may have to participate to get a developer interested in doing it, but when we're talking about adding the 120 spots on to what we're contemplating already, we're looking at, just a little over $13,000 a spot versus the $25,000 a spot in the original 4-story deck. So I'm going to err on the side of optimism, understanding that along with Alderman Healy, I supported a project down the street I supported a project that wasn't the 6-story building down the street, but for me, balancing things out, I think the expenditure of the extra $1.5 million or $13,000 per parking space here is a great investment in the city of Elmhurst, and that's the direction I'll go. Thank you.
Any other comments as it relates to the motion to substitute? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll on, on the motion to substitute the minority report for the majority report, no, the minority report for the majority report. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just point of clarification, please. Just, can you denote what an aye versus an nay?
So an aye for this is to vote for the minority report put forth by Alderman Palomsky and Alderman Levin. An aye for this is to remove the majority report, go with the minority, which is the 55-foot.
5-story.
5-story.
Thank you.
Got it?
Yes, sir.
So an aye is to support the minority.
No is 65.
Yes.
Isn't an aye just to substitute the minority report? Then we still have to vote on the minority report?
Yes.
Or whatever becomes the majority.
In effect, 2 votes, but yes, if you're voting for this, you want to see it substituted, assuming you want to see it substituted to vote for it, but you never know.
Thank you.
Roll call. Levin. Oh, excuse me, Palomsky
Aye.
made the motion. Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Conquest.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Schroeder.
Aye.
Dunn.
No.
Leader.
No.
Graham.
Aye.
Tipskin.
No.
York.
No.
I show 7 ayes and 7 nays, is that correct?
8-6.
Did I, where's the 8?
Sounds good to me.
I'm confused. Where did I go
8-6.
wrong?
6-8, or
6-8.
Leader was a nay? That's where I went, okay. Would make it 6, and that's 7, 8. So it's 6 ayes and 8 nays.
6 ayes and 8 nays, motion to substitute fails. Back to the underlying motion, or the original motion by Alderman Mulliner and Alderman Leader. Any additional comments as it relates to the majority report out of committee? Alderman Braham.
Now I would like to make the motion to amend from the 65 feet to the 45 feet in the two areas on the report being page 1, the last paragraph, and page 2, paragraph 1.
Alderman Braham, I'd ask that you take a look at the majority report. The stuff you want to amend is not in the last page. So if you could take a minute and tell me exactly the amendment you'd like to make, I would appreciate it.
Would it be too basic to say anywhere where it says 65 to make it 45?
I don't think we have to strike it in the case.
I'm just double checking to see if
That's
it's
the
anywhere
case,
else.
right?
Which would be on page 2, the first paragraph in 2 spots.
I know. Just the last paragraph? You know, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant what it says. We can just change it once here. Alderman Braham,
Yes, sir.
you want to amend, the gist of it is you want to recommend a 45-foot tall structure. Is that correct?
That is accurate, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I think the simplest way, because the way the third paragraph or the first paragraph on the second page is written, you'd have to rewrite the whole thing. I think it would be simple, because it's not your intent to rewrite what Alderman Levin stated in committee. I think you can just make a motion to amend the recommendation at the end. Motion, therefore, the Development Planning and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve a 45-foot structure and associated variations. That's the simplest way to do it.
That achieves the goal. Thank you, sir.
All right, so we have a motion from Alderman Braham to amend the majority report. Therefore, the Development Planning and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve a 45-foot structure and associated variations. Well stated? Alderman Braham?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have a second for Alderman Braham's amendment? Alderman Gutenkopf will second the amendment. Second the motion to amend. Alderman Braham, your amendment, would you care to continue the conversation?
No, sir. I'm in support of a 4-story structure.
Great. That was brief. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Oh, this is relatively short. Because this isn't about 5 being better than 6. This is about an oversized behemoth building that disregards the comprehensive plan, ignores the will of taxpayers, and satisfies special interests. This has been a developer-driven project from the beginning. Have we forgotten that this 6-story building was pitched as necessary only to incorporate office space for the developer? Have we forgotten that the zoning commission initially denied the 6 stories? Taxpayers rightly believed that this meant a 4-story final building. The building concept originally sold to the city council. I supported the original parking deck when I approved paying for some of the necessary site work. Had I known then that we would be contemplating a structure 4 times larger than the Larch Street deck, my votes since 2008 would have been totally different. The only things we're compromising tonight are the taxpayers. That's it. I told you I was short.
Any other comments on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll. She got the amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Braham,
Aye.
Gutenkopf,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
No.
Leader,
No.
Polumsky,
No.
Hipskin,
No.
York,
No.
Levin,
No.
Healy,
No.
Onquist,
No.
Kennedy,
No.
Mulliner,
No.
Wagner,
No.
yeah, I made that mistake, thanks. Okay, so that's 3 ayes and 11 nays.
3 ayes, 11 nays, motion fails. On to the majority report, still under consideration. Any other comments before I ask for a vote? Seeing none, I ask Clerk Spencer to call, roll call for the vote, report number 7.2.
Mulliner.
I'm sorry, 7.3.
3. Mulliner,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Polumsky,
Aye.
Graham,
No.
Hipskin,
Aye.
York,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Healy,
Aye.
Honquist,
Aye.
Kennedy,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Gutenkopf,
Nope.
Deuter,
No.
Dunn,
Aye.
11 ayes, 3 nays.
11 ayes, 3 nays. That motion carries. Reports approved. On to agenda item number 8, reports and recommendations from appointed and elected officials. 8.1, Mayor Morley. Couple of them. Elmhurst Police Explorers is holding a pancake breakfast this Saturday, 7 a.m. at the Elmhurst Family Restaurant. Yes, Jim, that's correct?
That's correct.
Although it was 2.5, 3 hours ago. Clerk Spencer did mention the drug take-back program, Drug Take-Back Day that Elmhurst Police Department is hosting. That is this Saturday from 10 to 2 at the Elmhurst Police Department. And then finally, I have been asked by Chairman Cronin of DuPage County to join the DuPage County Green Government Council, and I've accepted that invitation. The council IDs ways to conserve natural resources, reduce environmental impacts, develop sustainable initiatives, and link these to economic development. I appreciate the chairman's invitation. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. Two updates. One, the spring cleanup schedule. This is a little different. It's a lot different from years past, in fact, and how the refuse company is going to pick up this year for the unlimited garbage. And they're going to be on consecutive Saturdays, with the first one being this Saturday, and they're broken down by the day of the week where your garbage is picked up. So if you're a Wednesday pickup, your unlimited spring cleanup will be this Saturday. If your regular garbage day is Thursday, May 3rd will be your day, and if it's a Friday pickup, May 10th will be your day. We have been sending out releases and putting up signs to let everyone know. I know that some of the aldermen have been sending out this notice to their constituent list, so thank you for that. We appreciate it. There are 3, April 26th, May 3rd, May 10th.
Okay.
The second item I have is the stormwater update. April 18th came and went quietly last week, at least from a weather perspective. I'm happy to see. However, staff continued our efforts towards the stormwater mitigation. We have been meeting with the Park District, and I know that Alderman Kennedy, Alderman Polumsky have been meeting with the school district as well to continue the discussions on some intergovernmental cooperation towards stormwater sites, stormwater mitigation sites. We last met with the Park District on April 14th, and we talked through policy changes that the city is considering and the projects. I've shared a draft of an intergovernmental agreement with the director of the Park District so that we can work back and forth on something that both entities would find acceptable, and I feel that we're really making progress in that sense. They have asked for additional information from the city on what has been done outside of the mitigation projects. So what we're putting together, staff, is, so far it's a 7-page memo on everything that the city has done since 2010 to help with the stormwater issues. I'm not going to go through them tonight because I understand it's late. Once I finalize this and we send it out to the Park District and the next day, I'll make sure that the City Council gets a copy of that, and we can also post it under the goals on board docs as well.
Okay.
That's all that I have. Thank you.
Any other reports or recommendations? Alderman York, did you have something? I couldn't.
Yeah, under events, I know this Sunday is the grand opening of the Elmhurst Park District renovated greenhouse. And I know that's, quite an undertaking by the Park District, so I just wanted to let everybody know that that's occurring. I believe it's 2 o'clock, but you'll want to check their website. I don't know that for a fact, so.
Okay.
It's in Wilder Park, excuse me.
Thanks for the clarification. No other reports or recommendations? Other business? Any other business?
Ordinances, sir.
Ordinances?
Oh, look at that. 10:40. I apologize. Agenda item number 9, not other business, but ordinances. This was put on here in the possibility that a report coinciding with it would pass. But, however, to consider an ordinance on the same night, we will have to suspend our rules. So, I will entertain a motion to suspend our rules to vote on an ordinance this evening pertaining to a report that we voted on. Vote to suspend by, motion by Alderman Bram.
Oh, let me do it.
Second by Alderman Healy. I'm going to go with a voice vote on this. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. So now it is appropriate for us to consider agenda item 9.1, which is the push cart vendor ordinance relating to the previous report that we discussed ad nauseum this evening. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the ordinance. Oh, I'm sorry. Clerk Spencer, would you like to read the ordinance?
An ordinance to amend section 31.134 entitled Push Cart Food Vendors and to amend section 31.137 entitled Special Food Dealers, or Article 11 entitled Food Establishments of Chapter 31 entitled Business Licensing, Regulation, and Registration of the Municipal Code of the City of Elmhurst, Illinois, push cart vendors and special food dealers.
Motion to approve. Alderman Wagner, second. Alderman Honquist. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Wagner.
Aye.
Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Gudenkauf.
No.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
No.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
12 ayes and 2 nays.
12 ayes, 2 nays. Motion carries. Ordinance is approved. Agenda item number 10, other business. Any other business this evening? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Alderman York, with a second by Alderman Mulliner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
One thing we always could agree on.